28. "Kill her now and get it over with," said Elizabeth Hund, her voice flat and strained. "We've got all the information out of her that we can."
"What information?" replied Vost. "We don't know anything except that Takuta is close by, and we knew that just from catching her. There's a lot more to get."
Hund kicked viciously at the wooden table that held the pinioned body of Ariaki Sine. The desk sergeant didn't respond. She was so deeply drugged that the pain from the wrist and ankle restraints didn't even penetrate. Hund kicked again. "Look, she's so doped up now that we'll never get anything out of her. You didn't have to give her 4 shots. It just blacked her out."
"We weren't getting anything out of her before the shots either. Those desktops can stand a lot of pain. The drugs at least got her to babble about some combat she'd seen, something about wrecked vehicles."
"You just didn't like the screams." Hund walked around the other side of the table so she could see Vost directly. "I thought you liked a little pain with your women. Or is it you just like women?"
"You knew the deal when you came with us. You have no rank better than either Fiona or Michelle, and if Tammy Wilson wants some of the action, she's welcome to it as well. You knew that coming in."
Juggling 3 women, and perhaps a 4th, was harder than he'd thought it would be. The 2 techs had been docile about the situation, but Hund, the navigator of the ill-fated Teledyne, was a different matter. Perhaps it was because she was odd man out in the organization, with nothing really to do, that made her such a witch. Vost was sorry he'd decided to add her to his list.
"In any case, we've got enough."
He stepped away from the table to gaze out the window that looked out over the early sun and the broad expanse of grasslands that stretched toward the distant forest.
"You're the one with the navigation skills," he continued. "Use some of that to find out where Takuta and his people are. I'll deal with the rest of it."
Hund left the unconscious sergeant to come alongside Vost. She took his hand in hers. "I'm sorry I snapped at you," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. He didn't draw away, and she held him tighter. "I think she's dangerous. We know she's talked to SirArminius. After all, he's the one who gave her to us. I think he'll use that to cut a better deal. But aside from that, she may have talked with others. It's like a virus in the body. She and it needs to be destroyed. Kill her now." Vost turned to face her.
"She's a danger only if we don't act. Find me Takuta, and we'll go stomp him. That's what will convince these people that we're the future. And an expensive future."
Hund rested her head on his chest. "All right, Garber," she purred. "I'll find them. You stomp them, but then this one is mine."
"Done. Find them, and she's yours."
It didn't take Elizabeth Hund long to get a reasonable fix on Takuta and his group. She knew from the information Sine had given to SirArminius that they were between 5 to 8 hours away by foot. The patrol had made it to the city in 1 night. She also knew that other contact patrols had been sent to the other enclaves. That put the desk group somewhere north of the city and probably at the edge of the woods. The drugged reference to a battle gave her an even better fix. The forces of the Usagumo had been in contact with those of the Amatukaze. A few questions to the leaders of the Usagumo gave her the battle location. She had the Takuta force well located. The sun was directly overhead when the battle mechs fired up. They had made their headquarters in one of the deserted bastions of the outer wall, well separated from the rest of the defenses and outside the city proper. Seagroves and Pesht had wanted to be inside the enclave, but Vost had vetoed that idea at once. He was more interested in keeping the mercenaries separated from their possible employers until the deal was done. In any case, the Bastion provided security. The Bastion, with its towering scarp and counterscarp, would keep all but the most insistent away from the mechs. The walls were no problem for the two land mechs, and Seagrove's Lamb could also traverse them with ease. Being isolated had the advantage of adding mystery to their presence. The operation against Takuda was to be a straight brute force and ignorance operation. 3 mechs against less than a dozen infantry would be a cakewalk. Even a lance as weak as Vost's should be able to deal with them. Granted, Takuda's group had a short-range missile launcher, but how much did that count against the smothering fire that the Javelin could deliver at the same range? If Takuda's people had the temerity to open fire with their SRM, the Javelin would deluge their location with its own missiles. The counterfire radar on the right side of the Javelin's head could plot the location of the launcher to within 25 meters. And even if its missiles didn't make a direct hit against the system, the dozen explosions in the area would probably make the enemy gunner very respectful. There would be no second shot. It was BF and I all the way. Vost and Pesht blasted out of the Bastion in boiling clouds of incandescent gas. They hunched down just outside the walls and began to make their way through the waist-high grass toward the scene of the previous day's combat. Seagroves would fly out later. Fuel for the air portion of the Lamb was critical. He still had hours of flight remaining, but the fuel he had scrounged at the dropship would have to last until he could find a suitable local substitute. And that would have to wait until after they'd finalized the deal. Pesht trotted out ahead of the medium Panther, and Vost had to call him back. He wanted to hold back the Javelin's SRM armament until they located the targets. Vost was in the interesting position of having to lead with the medium and follow with the light mech. In normal conditions, the light Javelin would have been deployed in support of the 2 Locusts, with the Panther and the Lamb as reserve. But Vost didn't have the 2 Locusts. No one did. Seagroves had reported a definite kill on one of them, and the other was damaged at best. The finest technicians in the galaxy couldn't have jury-rigged the parts to build a functioning mech, and Takuda did not have the finest techs available. Nor did he have the depot workshop such repair activity would require. The mercenary settled comfortably into the Panther's command seat and let its easy gait across the savannah lull him into a feeling of euphoria. The scattered trash of the battlefield littered the grasslands. Patches of burned, brittle stalks marked the death throes of some giant metallic beast. This was the site of the recent and continuing combats. He knew there would be no fighting here today, however. The Yamatukaze and the Usaguma were observing a one-day truce. It had all been arranged. There were, however, observers from both enclaves somewhere among the patches of trees. This would be a good sales promotion. Vost turned the pair of mechs toward the forest. The Javelin moved up to the left of the Panther, 200 meters away and slightly behind. Vost noted that the other mech's positioned on the secondary screen as well as that on the heads-up display. He wiped the information from the HUD, leaving nothing but targeting symbols. There was no use having it cluttered with extraneous data. With no other mechs in the battle, the location and activity of the Allied mechs would just get in the way. Vost pressed forward on the throttle and felt the pressure against his back as the Panther began to gain speed. The Cat's Eye 5 targeting system swept the approaching woodline. No targets. Vost adjusted the sensor array to IR maximum. Under normal conditions, the infrared sensors were adjusted to react to the heat of a mech rather than a human. It was only in city fighting that the presence of humans became a survival imperative. In restricted terrain, where the PNT-9R was even more dangerous than in the open, the shadowy presence of an infantryman could spell the difference between a mech's survival and becoming a heap of glowing metal. The secondary screen showed the Javelin to the right rear as a bright green, its IFF identification number across the top of the image. Vost disregarded it. Then, emerging from the background clutter of the forest to the front, Vost saw the soft glow of an IR signature. A human. A human lurking in a hidden bunker right on the edge of the woods. He let the crosshairs of the PPC steady on the image. At this range, he could blast both bunker and the human to smithereens. His finger tightened on the trigger. No, he thought. That would be too easy. He lowered the mech's right arm and accelerated. Stomp the little bugger flat, he thought. That'll show him who's boss. The Panther sprang into the air and came down on the unmoving IR image, its right leg extended stiff and straight for the crushing blow. Just as the foot crashed through the top of the surprisingly soft bunker roof, Vost had a fleeting thought. The poor, stupid grunt had not moved. The mech's foot, a 3x6 meter slab of articulated Maximilian armor, sank through the overhead cover and kept on going down. And going. And going. And then stopped dead. The shock threw Vost against the restraining harness. The Panther's right foot was caught in an 8-meter deep pit, off balance. The mech's impetus had carried it forward. Vost brought the left leg under the toppling mech, but it stubbed its toe against the ground. He fought to get it free. The mech continued forward, falling. Vost swung the left arm back, trying to twist the mech free, trying to throw some weight onto the immobile left leg. It was no use. With stately grandeur, the Panther toppled forward into the scrub, the PPC driving itself into the soft earth. Then the cockpit struck, and Vost was thrown against his harness again. His feet came off the controls. His finger tightened on the firing buttons. The PPC roared to life. Great gouts of molten, incandescent, glowing dirt spewed out. The right shoulder of the thrashing mech lurched backwards, twisting the head face down against the ground. Vost hung suspended by the harness as he fought to regain control. By the time he got the Panther upright and functioning, the Javelin was into the forest verge. Vost shouted a warning over the comm line, but it was too late. He had a momentary vision of the Javelin lurching forward, its legs enmeshed in a web of vines. A tree snapped upright, his secondary screen showing the legs of the mech sideways. The Javelin broke free and staggered on. "Where are they?" screamed Pesht into his communicator. "They're everywhere! I'm lost!" Vost swept the area. There were IR signatures scattered through the trees. More signatures than Takuda could possibly have men. It was a trap. The secondary screen glowed with the identification of the incoming lamb. A heavy laser strike vaporized the ground in front of the Panther, leaving smoldering branches and glowing earth. Vost looked around for the antagonist, but it was just the lamb arcing away. "Seagroves, I'll get you for that!" "Sorry, boss. Thought it was one of them in front of you." There was a pause. Vost thought he heard a chuckle as the transmission ended. "I have no targets," came the next report from the lamb. Vost saw another IR blur. "This time I'll get you, you little crud," he thought. The signature blinked. It was retreating into the deeper forest. The Panther sprang forward. There was a slight tug on the mech's legs as it passed between two trees. "Damn vines," thought Vost. Gotta be careful. Then he saw the log swinging toward the panther's torso. He braced himself, felt the shock as the wood struck home. This was madness. There was nothing but shadows to fight.
"Pull back," he ordered over the comm line. "We're out of here."